This is Innovledia.
Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to animate your objects in Maya. Alright? In 3D, animation is a process in which objects are manipulated over time so that they appear as moving or exhibit some form of change over time. Animation represents change in the state of an object over a particular time period. So, any sort of change that we can observe over time is animation. Animation is what gives life to objects and characters. It is the very foundation of every animated and science fiction movie that makes us feel like everything is real and automated. Animation is such an art form that is used everywhere. Today, almost every movie involves some form of animation, whether it is to bring the dinosaurs to life in Jurassic World, or the human-like apes in Planet of the Apes, or just the movie titles alone. You will find animation everywhere in almost every industry, and hence, the opportunities that come along with animation are endless. Technically, the main objective of animation is to make an object move over time all by itself exactly in the way you want. If you can do that, you can animate anything, no matter what it is. In Maya, we animate objects using keyframes. Keyframes store the values for the parameters or properties of the objects. These keyframes are set on a timeline to measure the change that happens to an object over time. Alright? Right now, this might feel little confusing to you, but it will eventually become clear as we move on to animating our objects in Maya. So, there are certain things that you need to know before we begin animating our objects, such as this time slider is divided into frames. Now, what is a frame? Ever wondered what a video is made of? Yes, that is where the frames come in. A video is made of frames. Frames are like images, each containing a particular state of an object or scene. When we look at these frames one by one at a particular speed, like 24 frames a second, the objects appear to be moving. This playback speed of 24 frames per second is called the frame rate of a video. As we watch animation in video format on our television and smartphones, so we use the term frame when creating an animation in Maya. And hence, the frame rate within Maya is called the frame rate for animation. Here, 24 frames make 1 second of time if the frame rate is 24 frames per second. This frame rate is different for different purposes. Like for movie, 24 frames per second is the choice, while for a TV show, the frame rate is usually 30 frames per second. Today, we even use 60 and 120 frames per second to make our animation look smooth and clean. So 120 frames here on the time slider means we have 5 seconds of time if the frame rate is 24 frames per second. You can change the frame rate by clicking here on this drop down and selecting the desired frame rate from this list. For now, I am going to select 60 frames per second. Once I have selected this, the time slider will now display 300 frames because it displays 5 seconds of time by default. So if there are 60 frames in 1 second, then 5 seconds will have 300 frames. Alright? Same way, using the range slider, you can set the number of frames displayed within the time slider, either by dragging this slider from both the sides or by directly entering the numbers here. This number marks the beginning frame on the time slider, while this number the ending frame. You can also set the beginning and end frames of animation, which is like the total number of frames for your animation. Alright? Now, basically, you can animate almost any property or parameter of an object. All you have to do is select the object and either press S on your keyboard, which will set a keyframe for all the transformation attributes of an object, or you can right-click on any particular attribute and select Key Selected to set a keyframe for that attribute. To do the same thing using the attribute editor, you have to right-click on any attribute and select Set Key to set a keyframe for that attribute. You can see this red vertical line here represents the keyframe, and also the attributes will turn red for which you have set a keyframe. Okay? You have to set at least 2 such keyframes for an attribute to create an animation. And those 2 keyframes must have different values for that attribute. So, if there is no change in the value, there will be no animation. Alright? So, for now, let me press the S key on keyboard to set a keyframe for all the transformation attributes of this object. And make sure you are on the right frame. I have set the keyframe on frame number 0. You can also enter the exact frame number here to jump to that particular frame where you want to set the keyframe. Okay? Now, I have to set another keyframe here to be able to animate this object. Let me jump to the frame number 300 by typing in here 300 and pressing the enter button. As I can choose to animate any of these attributes, so I can move this object using the Move tool. You can directly type in the value here and then press the S key again, which will set a keyframe on this particular frame, which is the last frame on the time slider. Once the keyframes are set, you can click on this play button to play your animation. Look, the object starts moving on frame number 0 and stops at frame number 300, exactly where the keyframes are set. Alright? You can stop the looping by clicking on this button here. When it displays 1, it means the animation will play only once, and so there will be no looping. When I click on it again, it turns into an oscillation mode, in which the animation will loop, but in a forward and backward direction, as if it is bouncing between the 2 keyframes. And when I click on it again, it will turn to continuous looping mode, where the animation will keep looping. Okay, I can stop the playback. Similarly, I can animate the rotation attribute of this object. I can go to frame number 0 by clicking here on the time slider. Remember, you can always jump to a particular frame by typing the number here and pressing the enter button. Now, I don't need to set any keyframe here for rotation because a keyframe has already been set for all of these values when I pressed the S key for the first time. So, I just have to go to the last frame and rotate the object using the rotate tool. Let me enter a specific value here. Whenever we change a value and it has not been saved within a keyframe, the attribute will become light red in color. So, we have to press the S key again to store these changes within that keyframe. Okay? Now if we play our animation, you will see that the object is both moving and rotating at the same time within these 300 frames. The same thing can be done with its scale values. Just select the object, go to the last frame, scale it up, and also move it little upward and place it properly on top of this plane. Once everything looks good, press the S key and the keyframe will be updated with these new values. Now I am going to play it again. This time it is rotating and moving and also scaling up over time. Alright? We can even set multiple keyframes for animating our objects. Like, I can go to frame number 150 and scale it up and move it upward like the way it was in frame 300. And then press the S key to set a keyframe for these changes. Then go to frame 300 and make everything normal the way it was before, and press the S key again. Now if we play our animation, you will observe that the object scales up from frame 0 to frame 150 and scales down from frame 150 to frame 300. In this way, you can animate an object in any manner you want over a particular time period. Alright? Now what if we wanted to edit this animation and move these keyframes from one frame to another? Well, there comes the graph editor. You can open it by going to Windows menu, Animation Editors, and click on Graph Editor. If you select the object which you have animated, you will find its animation curves within the graph editor. These curves define how the animation will happen over time. We can edit the placements of the keyframes as well as their values. Here on the left hand side, you will find the name of the object that you have selected, and below that all its attributes. Doesn't matter whether or not they are animated. You can either click on the name to display the curve for all its attributes, or you can click on each of the attributes to display their individual curves one by one. Those that are not animated will have straight horizontal lines on the graph. You can even select the keyframes by dragging a marquee around them and change their values to anything you want, and press the Enter button to confirm. This box is for changing the values, and this one here is for changing the frame number on which the keyframe is located. This means I can not only change the values for a keyframe but also its location on the time slider. I can click on the name to display the curves for all of the attributes and drag select all of these keyframes on frame 150 and change their location from frame 150 to frame 75 and press Enter to confirm. Look, all the keyframes have been moved from frame 150 to frame 75 on the time slider. Same way, I can now drag select all of these keyframes on frame 300 and change their location to frame 150. You can fit the graph by clicking on this button here. If I play the animation now, you will see that the object is moving from frame 0 to 150 and then stopping after 150, as there are no keyframes after that. And also, the speed has doubled because the same animation is now happening within 150 frames, which was previously happening within 300 frames. I can move these keyframes back to frame 300 and delete the ones on frame 75 by selecting them and pressing the delete button on keyboard. You can again click on this button to fit the graph within this window. Now, I am going to minimize the editor and create a new camera by going to View menu and clicking on Create Camera from View. This will create a new camera which I can select by going to View menu and clicking on Select Camera, and then rename it to Shooting Cam. And then I am going to switch to Top View and move its pivot to the center of the grid by pressing and holding down D and X key on keyboard. The D key activates the pivot editing mode, while the X key is for snapping the pivot to grid intersections. Using the Move manipulator, I can stay in a particular axis while snapping. Alright? And then I can switch back to the perspective view. Move to frame number 0 and set a keyframe particularly for rotate Y attribute of the camera. Then move to frame 300 and rotate it somewhat around our scene or around this animated object. And then set a keyframe again. If I play the animation, you will see that now both the object and the camera is in motion. However, you might observe that the camera rotation starts slowly and then ends slowly. We can make this rotation speed constant from beginning to end by going to the graph editor, press F to fit the curve or click on this button, select both of these keyframes and click on this linear tangents option. This will straighten the curve, making a constant rotation over time. There will be no slow in or slow out. This is how it looks like. If you want to add a slow in or slow out, you can go back and select the keyframes and click on Auto Tangents option. You can also edit the tangents of the curve manually by dragging them with the middle mouse button. Alright? I animated this ball in the very same way. Of course, there is no camera animation, but just the rolling ball on the floor. Okay? So, this is how we can animate our objects in Maya. See you in the next video.